Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the In Full Bloom Book Club series. Here we utilize the transformative power of storytelling to explore perspectives and to cultivate empathy, compassion, and connection. So our season topic and season theme for this season is collective grief / trauma. Our questions that we pose to our audience members and to ourselves is, how does trauma shape us? What consequences of collective trauma are we facing today? And how can we support one another in navigating collective grief? So the book we're about to cover for this portion of our season that we're diving into is How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. Physical and digital book purchase options are in the description box below, so go ahead and check that out. Get you a copy and join along this season so you can be following along in our conversation as well. This is our book intro. We haven't covered any chapters just yet. And so today's episode, we will be giving our first impressions of the book and topics it will cover. So we're going to be reflecting on our own understanding and misunderstandings, experiences, biases, in anticipation of the ways that this narrative will provide us an expanded perspective. And also today, for quote of the day, Elena will be providing us with the quote. So Elena, go ahead and take it away.
So I chose a quote from George Bernard Shaw, and it says, "Those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything." And I chose this quote because based on the synopsis of the book, it seems like adjusting to change despite unfortunate circumstances is kind of like the theme I'm getting from the short snapshot and description of the text.
I love that. I love that quote. Yeah, it's so spot on. I do feel like that does resonate with a lot of probably what we're going to be jumping into. So I love that.
So we're going to go ahead and read the synopsis for the novel taken from Goodreads.com. The synopsis reads, "For fans of Cloud Atlas and Station 11, a spellbinding and profoundly prescient debut that follows a cast of intricately linked characters over hundreds of years as humanity struggles to rebuild itself in the aftermath of a climate plague. A daring and deeply heartfelt work of mind-bending imagination from a singular new voice." Beginning in 2030, a grieving archaeologist arrives in the Arctic Circle to continue the work of his recently deceased daughter at the Batagaika crater, where researchers are studying long-buried secrets now revealed in melting permafrost, including the perfectly preserved remains of a girl who appears to have died of an ancient virus. Once unleashed, the Arctic plague will reshape life on Earth for generations to come, quickly traversing the globe, forcing humanity to devise a myriad of moving and inventive ways to embrace possibility in the face of tragedy. In a theme park designed for terminally ill children, a cynical employee falls in love with a mother desperate to hold on to her infected son. A heartbroken scientist searching for a cure finds a second chance at fatherhood when one of his test subjects, a pig, develops the capacity for human speech. A widowed painter and her teenage daughter embark on a cosmic quest to locate a new home planet. From funerary skyscrapers to hotels for the dead to interstellar starships, Sequoia Nagamatsu takes readers on a wildly original and compassionate journey spanning continents, centuries, and even celestial bodies to tell a story about the resiliency of the human spirit, our infinite capacity to dream, and the connective threads that tie us all together in the universe. Alrighty, so our first question for this book intro is just everyone giving their general expectations, assumptions, and whatnot about the novel. What are some of the thoughts, feelings, and/or internal struggles you anticipate encountering? So I am so psyched about this novel. I don't know. I feel like I haven't read a word, obviously, other than synopsis, but I'm like gushing. I just think the concept is so cool. I think I've said this season before that like dystopian like type of narratives really appeal to me, as do kind of like sci-fi esque things, and just really an exploration. What I love about those novels is that you have people and you study human nature under this really challenging circumstance or under a circumstance that we're not used to seeing. So it's kind of another way to examine human nature and and relationships and things like that. So I'm super excited about that. And it's also so like, it's like bizarre too. Some of the concepts that it will be exploring. So I love the imagination there. I don't know. I'm just interested in kind of seeing how these different narratives play out and how they make sense in the context of the entire novel. And I just think the concept of um, watching how this one event, right, impacts, like watching the ripple effect of that and how it impacts so many people and the different ways that we as humans learn to cope and navigate that, I think is just so relevant to, again, what we're experiencing now globally. Just honestly really relevant to like the human experience. What a cool way to like examine again, like human nature, to use all these different elements that separate us, right, in an effort to almost show our connectedness, I just think is super cool.
I'm a little unsure about how I will enjoy this book
Ooh.
because, like, historically, like with reading sci-fi, just the world building element of it, sometimes different terms and like, oh, this means this. Like when it's sometimes when the concepts are so abstract,
Mm,
it's kind of hard for me to get past like trying to memorize and learn all the different terms and aspects of the world, and that I kind of lose the connection with the characters.
mm,
So it's like I really enjoy sci-fi movies, but like for some reason, books I could never really get into them for that reason. But um, other than that, just some internal struggles I anticipate. I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of like would you sacrifice one for the betterment of all type dilemmas? Like in a lot of these like dystopian kind of novels, there's usually some struggle like that. Um, and yeah, I'm just a little I want to keep an open mind and try not to get so caught up in just remembering terms and the logistics of the world. And I really want to try to engage with the characters and their stories.
Yeah, I am excited about this book, particularly because of how close and so it's set, or like one part of the story is set in 2030, and that is very close to where we are. And so I always find that books that are written in the future, but not too distant in the future, there's something haunting about it, but also just kind of coming to terms with, I don't know, it always puts me in a position to like face my mortality, and also just how the world will be shaped differently in years to come. As much as we want to believe the world we live in today is what it's going to look like years down the line, that's not true. And that's evident in, the COVID pandemic we had, or, still feeling the effects of that as well. So I am excited to kind of dive into our future reality. Um, I'll say I would definitely struggle with different stories happening all at once. Or I don't know how Sequoia lays out the story. I think it'd be a nice little challenge to try to, one, find that thread that connects all these stories together. I think that's going to be a big part of us reading this story, and a lot of what maybe Sequoia is trying to point out at us is like, what is that thing that connects us all, even over a span of like hundreds of years. So I'm curious to see how well I can identify that myself, but then also, um, I don't know, just following along with these different stories and finding pieces of who I am and things I resonate with along in those different stories, even though they happen over, different generations and stuff. So, yeah.
All right, y'all. Next question.
Reflect on how collective tragedies that occurred in your lifetime might change society's actions slash behaviors for generations to come. As far as COVID, I know like certain services there where it wasn't an option to like do like curbside before, like certain things like you now don't have to go into the building. I know certain restaurants didn't really have like expansive curbside carry out, and I feel like I've seen like even like more spaces allotted for that. or like that's more heavily pushed, like, oh, you should come here because you don't have to come inside. Things like that. I've kind of noticed that it seems like it'll be here for a minute.
Yeah, and even I've seen like a increase in kind of remote work opportunities from social media, it kind of being promoted as like speak with your employee or employer about what can be remote work. And certainly that was an option before, but I imagine that seeing that it was something that was like a viable option during the COVID pandemic, makes it seem like okay, it could be a viable option like moving forward, and people actually would prefer this, and it helps with their work-life balance.
I'm obviously the recent tragedy, like the COVID pandemic, is the one that I can recall more easily versus 9/11 or anything else. Um, and I mean, beyond our immediate, what we've already recognized as changes in like our healthcare system and um, kind of witnessing the flaws that we have in those areas. I think also, aside from that, just the level of anxiousness a lot of us are like where we are with our mental health is very evident, especially at due to the aftermath of the pandemic. And I'm curious to honestly see how that evolves. Because I mean, right now we're in this space where we witness so many mass shootings, and even like now it's becoming like just sporadic shootings. Like it's not even mass shootings. It's just people just shooting because. And I don't know. I can't remember the terminology that they now coined it with, but shooting our neighbors and, everyone who's like, now it's dangerous to turn into someone's driveway. Just those little things, just like the level of like anxiousness people are experiencing now is insane. Um, and I don't know. I'm just really curious to see how when it's almost feeling like a pot of boiling water. And for so long we've allowed ourselves to let the steam out, but now it's just becoming this like uncontrollable thing that we have to deal with eventually. So I don't know. I don't really have an answer on like how I can see this impacting us in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say I also think that another form of uh, like collective trauma that we experience is through media, and I think from you know Asia related to what you were talking about in terms of like our anxiety is just raising about so many things and our fears increasing. I think that's a part of it. The reality, I don't know what the statistics are about crime rates, but I imagine that a part of the feeling of like we live in a much more dangerous world, I mean, a part of it likely is because we are just exposed to so much more. I mean, in terms of just like laws and kind of how we're living today, I think most people would probably argue that maybe not if we compare it to like 50 years ago, you can argue maybe, but if we compare it to like centuries ago, we're definitely living in a less like in less violent societies, right? Because some of our basic needs are being met in a way that maybe wasn't at a different period of time, right? We were maybe fighting a bit more over resources and things like that. Yeah, I think media definitely plays a part in that, and it's constantly having access to what's going on all around the world. And when I think about the civil rights movement, for example, and anything that I'm saying, if anyone in the comments knows a bit more about what I'm speaking about, please, I am receptive to and encourage people to correct me. I want people to be well informed. But from my understanding, a part of what pushed the civil rights movement was that people were able, in the with the advent of the television and of broadcast media, people were able to see what was happening to protesters, for example. And I think that really it was one thing to maybe read about it in a newspaper or in a journal, but it's a different thing to see peaceful protesters, violent acts be done against them, to see pictures of hangings, and so it definitely one impacts how we view our world differently, but it also impacts our willingness to act on things, our commitment and investment in things. And so I think that's an important note that media has had such a major impact on how we see the world.
So, our last question is, what is your current perspective on the connectedness of people? In what ways, if at all, does this perspective impact your behavior? I will say, from a spiritual standpoint, I wholeheartedly believe in the connectedness of people. I believe, whether we see it or not, we have a great influence on each other, whether that's in close proximity or not. An idea that comes in my head is like the butterfly effect is like one thing happens and then like or the ripple effect of that kind of goes after. I believe in that. But like even deeper in a deeper sense of spirituality, believing in the way like you mentioned earlier, Elena, vibrations. We all have this like certain frequency within us, and I kind of talk to Tia about this. Like I can feel her energy sometimes, and we are always transmitting these energies, and so we are always vibrating on a certain level with each other. And so I believe on a very spiritual, very like biological level, we are very much so all connected, and we impact our not only ourselves but the world around us. And we just I think the issue is we don't notice it, we don't see it because we're so honed in on our own experience, which is not to say that's a bad thing, but I think for me, I do get lost in that. I forget that I am also contributing to the experience of others. um, and I would like to say that I try hard every day to be mindful of that, but I'm human. But I think I at least make a very conscious effort every once in a while to remind myself that even when I have, a really crappy day, I can at least remember that I don't have to bring that to other people's spaces. And that ultimately, I never know what's going on in someone else's life. And just a very simple hello to someone could completely change the course of their whole day without me even realizing it. Um, so yeah, it's one of those things that I like to remind myself on. It's just not something that I've built a habit for necessarily, but I do try moving forward, and I do want to get to a point where I am more conscious of how I interact with people, knowing that I do have a certain influence over, just little parts of their day.
I believe that like we're all connected, but I can't say that it impacts. I mean, it impacts the way I interact with people, but on such like a subconscious level. Like the main thing that influences how I treat someone else is not to be cliche, but like how they treat me. Like I just find it difficult to meet someone that's like trying to hurt me from like I'm you, you are me. Don't do this. Like I don't know, I just can't do it. Um but there's that definitely is always in the back of my mind when I'm talking to someone or like meeting someone new. Um yeah.
I too like the connectedness of people is really important to me. Um, I think it's one of the few things that feels like true and certain for me in my life. I'd say I'd say I also experiment mentally with the with the idea of kind of a unified like consciousness of sorts. And so um in some ways like the idea that we are one for me can get really literal sometimes. That's like an idea again that I experiment with. I think the way that we impact each other is so endless, like the ripple effect is so um is in like the minute interactions and um I mean it's incredible to if I really like thought about all the interactions that summed up my experience as a child, like how much they influence my understanding of myself, my understanding of other people and so on and so forth, and therefore how I show up in the world and how I impact the people around me. It's just crazy. And I feel a sense of fidelity to like, for example, the people that came before me, not only is there like just some of their like DNA run through me, right? And again, if you're coming from like a, a certain like spiritual or even metaphysical belief, like, energetically we're connected in some way. But I don't know, just to consider like all the experiences that they had, all the dreams that they had, all the wishes that they had for themselves, and that they navigated that. um I don't know, and then to imagine that somewhere down the line I'm here is just kind of like crazy. Like if only they knew like what I would experience now, and to consider how that impacts my behaviors. I don't know. So again, I like I said, I experiment with kind of this idea of a unified consciousness, but I understand ourselves as like having all different experiences and different perspectives. Um, And so, with that being said, the way I choose to engage with people is probably more based on imagining what their experience with me would be like, versus feeling like you were saying, Elena, kind of that idea of if I hurt you, you hurt me, that type of thing. But yeah, I think I've said all I can say about that.
Social media kind of um like puts like a magnifying glass over how connected our experiences really are. Like even just the way if you look at certain like comedy that you might see online, you'll if you go to the comments, you'll see like, did we all live the same life? Like if you there'll be comedy about like being growing up in a Black household. And we're like, so we have the same mom. Like I think
Right. Like
specifically like
Black
comedy
Thanksgiving trip.
online.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the comments are always like, so we all had the same experience. These are all universal experiences. Like I think that really just shows how like we really are connected. Yeah.
Yeah. I especially see that on like TikTok. And I don't know if TikTok is reflecting like the way we're considering other people's experiences today, or if TikTok is a part of the reason that because of like the way the platform came out and how people chose to use it, like we're seeing so much more of people's experiences. But like I don't know, I felt like there were other platforms that they were a bit more curated, um,
Like
and
Instagram.
clearly curated. Yeah. So it's clear that like there's a specific image that I'm trying to create or narrative that I'm trying to create, whereas TikTok feels to me, and again, maybe it's also like where my age group. I'm like at the end of the millennial generation, but sometimes I'll see like the kind of relatable content and like how specific it is to like such a specific
Yeah.
experience is just like, yo, that's crazy. Yeah, there's nothing new under
But
the
it's like
sun.
millions of people relating to it.
For
The same.
sure. For sure. So that's, I agree with you, Elena. It definitely shows the connectedness of all of us in a certain way. Thank you, Tribe, for joining us today. We are so happy to have you. Please stick around for information about the charities our community is supporting this season. Those will be in the credits after this outro. Please join us for the next episode. There's always room for you here. Bye, y'all. Hey, Tribe. Before you go, we wanted to chat with you about how you can help your fellow humans navigate collective grief and trauma. This season, each host has chosen a charity to share with you all. The charities we've selected have missions that address collective grief or trauma in some way. Our hope is that you'll find a charity whose mission aligns with your hopes for humanity.
You can check the description box for links to our fundraising pages. We encourage you all to explore the websites for information about each organization's impact and ensure you're making an informed decision when giving. InfoBlue Media has no affiliation with any of these charities or crowdfunding platforms. Thank you all for your consideration.
Journey well.